or BP and get some monsters. I live in a teeny tiny town right off a major highway, so I'm used to creepers piling in occasionally. I decided I wanted some Faygo. Don't you judge me. So I pulled into the BP to hunt some down. As I'm glancing through the fridges, I notice there's this guy beside me. Someone obviously off the highway, and from way the hell away from here. As a farming community, we don't have hipsters, and this guy was a full-blown hipster. V-neck down to his sternum, shorts made out of some material you've probably never heard of, and flip-flops. Topped off with a mass of curly brown hair, a shitty goatee, and a fedora. He was also really tall and lanky. Probably a good 6'5" and 140 pounds soaking wet. Because he dressed so weird compared to what I'm used to, I glanced over at him. Apparently, that was mistake number one. He turned his full attention to me with his massive grin. He had a huge mouth with perfectly set white teeth. "Hey, pretty girl, what's up?" I didn't say anything at first because I started to panic. Not much?" I just kinda stammered out, grabbing a monster and spinning around back towards the front of the store. He followed me, chit-chatting about random shit. His name, his hometown, Millville is what he said. Blah blah bullshit. I just kind of at him as I finally broke into the safety of the young cashier's vision. She was probably only a little under my age, so I hoped she would understand how creepy this guy was being. Apparently not, because she started flirting with him. This was good because it got him off of my scent. I quickly paid for my shit and hightailed it out of there. I slid into my car, dropped my shit in the seat in less than 10 seconds. It had to be. When I turned around to shut the door, now that I had an open hand, he was there. "Where are you going?" "I want your number." Oh, God. I just sat there for a second, dazed. "No, I'm not giving you my number. Go away." I pulled on the door a bit, nudging him. He kicked it back, fully open to where I couldn't reach around him. I grabbed my wallet, where I keep my cell phone, and threatened to call the cops if he didn't go away. He got this weird look on his face, like extremely pissed mixed with rejection. "Oh, come on. I just want to go out with you. I want some fun before I head back home. You look like you could be tons of fun." He licked his lips. I was horrified. This guy was the creepiest fuck I've ever been around. He leaned down and one of his long arms came into my car and grabbed my face. Before I knew it, he was caressing me and leaning in for a kiss. I panicked and managed to swing my body around and kick him full force in the knee. He fell backwards on his ass onto the pavement, and I quickly got my phone out and dialed the cops and my work to tell them what had happened and that I would be a bit late. The cops came and arrested him. The chick in the BP had the nerve to tell them that I attacked him. But they were able to go back through the surveillance, and you can clearly see me trying to shut my door, looking pretty damn horrified. I guess he never had any felonies or anything, so they gave him a warning and told him to stay at the hotel, go to his reunion, or whatever, and then go home and that the police would check on him occasionally. I kinda just hoped it was a family reunion because maybe his mom could have beat some sense into him. 3 weeks later, I get her friend request on Facebook from this ass faggot. "Hey girlie, I just wanted to say I was sorry for what happened. I really hope you can forgive me and that we can be friends. Add me back, please." Smiley face. I practically cried laughing for a good 10 minutes. I deleted the request and blocked him. A day later, I get 3 messages from apparently friends of his. Most of them were, "You bitch, you didn't have to block him. There's no fucking reason." Or, "You shouldn't have fucking let him on, you dumb whore." Or my favorite, "I hope you die, cum dumpster." All from women. I blocked them too. A week later, I get a message from another account by this guy. "You're fucking bitch and I hope you die. You're a stupid whore and had no reason to do this shit to me. You ruined my life. Fuck you and fuck your family." Needless to say, I blocked him too. What I want to know is how he got my name. The only thing I can think of is that while I was paying, he managed to see my student ID or the name on my card and get it off of that. But another weird thing is that my picture isn't me, and I didn't put my real town down. So I wonder if he messaged a bunch of other people and hoped one was me. Either way, it's still creepy. And slightly hilarious. A couple years back, my stepdad's brother proposed to a woman who took the ring he bought her and ran to Florida. It was a huge rock, and he had gotten it through a family friend who brokers jewels. She returned a few months later with a baby, which she said was his, and that she hadn't realized she was pregnant when she left. She was scared because, 1, she didn't want to raise a kid alone, and later found out that she had already lost 3 children to CPS for abuse and neglect. And 2, she was doubly scared that the child would be messed up and more work to raise, because she'd been drinking, smoking, and who knows what else the whole time she was pregnant. He was apparently desperate for a family, given that his first 2 kids by his first woman wouldn't talk to him because he's an alcoholic waste who couldn't hold a job. So he took her back and they got married. This child spent pretty much every day alone in its crib, sitting in its own filth in the dark, given a bottle every few hours, and little to no attention or stimulation otherwise. The house was almost literally a shack, with a huge open hole into the foundation, about 10 feet across and 10 feet down, with exposed pipes, and no guardrails around. There was an active road on one side of the 30-foot yard, and a good 10-foot plus, depending on the season, drop into the water on the other, neither side with a fence. My uncle and his wife threw parties pretty much every night. Drinking, smoking, occasionally people bringing meth and whatnot, and the police getting called all the time. However, because of the family's long and historied relationship with the police, he was not really held accountable for things. The cops watched him like a hawk, but they never got into serious trouble. One night, Uncle and his wife got pulled over for weaving all over the road. She was in the driver's seat. He was in the passenger seat holding the child in his lap, There was no car seat. Both of them were hammered, but my uncle had somehow gotten it into his head that because she didn't have a license, that she would get into less trouble if they got caught. The first thing he did when he sobered up was to call our house in a panic, begging us to volunteer to take his son if CPS took him away, so that he'd still be able to be in his kid's life and not just lose him to the foster system. After much discussion, Mom and Stepdad said yes, and took the then just over 1-year-old in. He screamed for hours on end, followed by silent, almost catatonic fits. He wouldn't make eye contact. He refused to be held, especially when fed. He would yank on the bottle until he could hold it himself. He was unable to keep formula down, and later had an issue with food. We found out after much work that it was a nervous reflex, and he's over it now. Uncle got visitation rights, but wife signed away rights to parenthood. She was leaving my uncle, and apparently wasn't interested in staying if they didn't have a child together. Uncle visited at least once a week, usually in the company of a friend, and both would reek of alcohol. He played roughly with his son, dropped it on his head twice, despite my mom's desperate pleas to be more gentle, and repeatedly harassed my mother by following her in public at a distance to keep an eye on his kid. He didn't even live in the area and had to drive out to do this. I was alone at home with the child one night and heard someone pull up in the driveway. Looking out the window, I saw a gray truck I didn't recognize idling in the driveway. A man in a baseball cap was sitting in the driver's seat, just staring at the house. I ran downstairs and locked the doors, both front and back, and kept the phone nearby. There had been talks of my uncle losing his right to visitation because of how he'd been treating my mom, and he'd threatened to send friends to the house to keep an eye out on his place. The truck eventually left, and I told my mom when she got home. This sort of tension went on for months, including a particularly uncomfortable night when he and his friend came to a church event. And the friend, who was in his late 40s, missing teeth, filthy and smelling like stale beer, wouldn't stop staring at me, flirting with me, telling me I was very mature for my age. And he began showing up regularly with one friend over all the others. The big shock came when early one morning, the caseworker, who had become somehow enamored with my uncle and didn't believe any of the stuff we told her, called, frantically apologizing. My uncle was on the news. He and the friend he'd been bringing over had just been arrested. Apparently he'd kidnapped an older woman, stripped her, and had been keeping her as a sex slave at his house for several weeks, with the friend living with him. A friend from out of state had visited, and they had offered her to him for money. He waited a week before reporting them, but the cops finally had a solid reason, with tons of evidence to come down on him. He'd been keeping the woman drugged and drunk, beating her, hiding her clothes, and keeping her chained up in a back room and threatening to kidnap and do the same to her teenage daughter if she called for help or tried to escape. Both he and his friend are currently in prison, and my adopted brother, now bright-eyed, excitable, and nothing like the cold and inhuman child that originally came to my mother's home, will be 4 years old in April. This story starts with my being assaulted in November of 2011. It may be, and probably is, logically speaking, unrelated, but it helps you understand quite how fucking scary the whole thing was. I don't talk much about the assault. It was extremely traumatic, but basically I was taking the subway, got off the train, and walked through a tunnel toward the southeast exit. I was completely alone, or at least I thought I was, until a guy suddenly grabbed me, held a knife to my throat, I still have a scar, and hissed, "Scream and I will kill you." Afterwards, he took all of my ID, looked at my driver's license, which of course had my full name, date of birth, and address on it, said, "Nice to meet you," and just walked away. I went to the police, but they never caught him, and he's still out there somewhere with my college ID. So he knows where I go to college, what courses I'm doing, and my college is not exactly shy about blabbing personal info to anyone who calls. He's got my driver's license and various other things. Even worse, he had been wearing a mask, so I could see him in the street or outside the college and have no idea it was him. On to the main story. One day, walking home from college, I noticed someone walking behind me. Not too close, maybe 100 meters or so, but they were taking the same turns as me. That doesn't necessarily mean much. It's a fairly common route back from town for people living in our estate, but it put me on edge, especially once we got closer to my house and he was speeding up, closing the gap little by little. I really didn't want him to know where I lived, because I would be alone in the house for the next few hours at least. But I also had nowhere else to go. After the third alleyway in a row, I'd had enough. I looked around for a house with its lights on, bolted to the door, and hammered on it. No one came to the door, and this guy was getting closer, so I just hammered harder and yelled, "Dave? Mike? Ian? Connor? Jason? Andrew? Owen? Matt? Stop lifting weights for a minute and let me in. There's a creeper following me." Seemingly convinced that the house was full of large muscled men about to come to my aid, the guy turned around and got the hell out of Dodge. It was scary, but I figured it was just one of those things. After that, the phone calls started. No one would say anything. They'd just breathe slowly and heavily, and then hang up. I'm an artist, and my phone number is on my business cards and website, so I assumed it's just a prank caller, although my post-traumatic spidey sense is kicking in big time. After a while, the phone calls stopped, which was a massive relief, at least until 2 weeks later, when I came home to find the front door unlocked. I know I locked it, because I live in a dodgy area. So dodgy that there are 2 more locked internal doors between the front door and the stairs to the bedrooms. But nothing had been taken, at least that I could see, so no one really took me seriously. I called the police, who didn't really give a flying fuck, but after I reminded them repeatedly I'd had an attacker who knew my address and who had made threats against me, they finally agreed to have a police APV drive past every so often to keep an eye out. That turned out to be bullshit, but whatever. A while after that, I came home after making a quick trip to the local shop. all of 300 meters away if you cut through the alleys, maximum. After putting the second load of laundry in, I got in and sat on the couch to watch air crash investigation with my cats. I noticed the cats seemed a little bit skittish, but they're strange creatures, and so I ignored it. Until I went to go to get the laundry out of the washer, which was in the kitchen on the other side of the hallway. The kitchen door is always closed, because otherwise the cats will eat all the food, so I had to open it to go in. And that's when I saw the whole floor was flooded, as in completely awash with water, and the washing machine was empty. I just about shit myself. I turned around, legged it into the living room, locked all the doors leading into it, and phoned my housemate to ask if she had been home that day. She, of course, said no, and asked what was wrong. When I told her I thought someone had been in the house, she asked if anything had been stolen, but all the electronics were still there. Laptop, TV, Wii, everything. I started to feel a bit like an idiot, even though there's a large part of me going, what about the fucking laundry? Because who the hell breaks into a house and doesn't take any electronics? I sigh, start apologizing for bothering her, and then glance up at the drying rack and notice all my underwear is gone. That was it for me. I grabbed the cats and booked it outside to call the police again. Once again they seemed uninterested, so I called my friend Sean, who's a badass, and he went through my house and established no one else was there, and told me to call if there was anything else. Not sure what else to do, since he had to go to work, and I was already wondering if I was just being paranoid. After all, how could he have gotten in without breaking a window? I went back inside, but didn't move off the sofa until my housemate came home. Later that week, I found a small screwdriver in a bush by the front door. Upon closer inspection, there were dozens of tiny scratches around the keyhole. Weeks pass, nothing else happens, and I'm feeling like an idiot. Sure, my underwear and other laundry is still MIA, but what can I say? I'm great at finding explanations for things. More time passes, and my housemate flies home to England to visit her parents. I'm a little wary, obviously, but tell myself there's nothing to worry about and get on with things. This works for a few days, until one night about 1 a.m., I'm sitting in my bedroom doing online jigsaw puzzles, and happen to glance out the window. There was a man, standing right on the other side of the fence between my yard and the empty field behind my house. Not moving, not showing any sign of doing anything, just standing and looking up at my window. I told myself he was just a random nosy sod who was out walking his dog or something and had seen me silhouetted in the window with my light on. So I closed the curtains and tried to ignore it. 20 minutes or so later, curiosity gets the better of me, and I open the curtains again. He's still there and hasn't moved an inch. I flip out, grab my phone and call 999. There's a man standing outside, watching me.
Where?
The field behind my house. He's just standing behind the fence.
Is he on your property?
No.
Call us when he is.
But he's been there nearly a half an hour. He's right behind the fence. Can't you just...
Call us when he's on your property.
Great. So glad I have these brave officers on my side. An hour later and he's still there. He hasn't moved. I crack and grab the phone again. Hi, I called earlier. There's a man in the field behind my house and...
Is he on your property?
The whole charade is repeated all over again. I grab my stuff and get out, but I live in a pretty grim estate. Like a housing project for any Americans. And it'd be pretty crap turn of events if I fled a prowler, only to get grabbed by a gang with knives. Once again, I called Sean. This time, I told him to bring the gun. He got there remarkably fast, and I took him out to the backyard. The guy was still there. I saw this look cross Sean's face. He's very protective of me, and he said loudly, "Really lucky I've moved in with you now, isn't it?" And he loudly cocked the gun. It was one of the pump-action ones. Boy, I'd hate to be anyone who tried to break into my house, but with all my guns and all. He glanced around and said, "Oh, there's that pesky rat," and raised, aimed, and discharged the gun in one fluid motion into the ground, maybe 6 feet in front of the guy. I wish I could say the guy ran away, because that'd be less creepy. But what he did was even creepier. He just turned and slowly walked away into the darkness. Sean slept on the couch that night. As of yet, I haven't seen the guy again, and I've since changed my name and canceled everything with ties to my address. I've also cut my hair and completely changed my style of dressing. I never wear skirts anymore, even though I used to wear them every day, because the man on the subway had specifically said how much he loved women in skirts. I still don't sleep too great though, to be honest.